Okay, sounds good. Okay, so my name is Dennis Dorrity. I'm a I'm an artist. I work doing my art as kind of my passion, but at the same time, it's a hobby for me. But at the same time, I get paid for my hobby, which is always nice. And so I do art. I mean, pretty as much as I possibly can. I just got finished working on a game called Dawn Shade, and we had actually pushed it out on Kickstarter, and we raised over $180,000 for the game. It was very, very successful for me. I enjoyed it a lot, and I learned a ton throughout the whole process too. It's actually the first time I'd ever worked on a game uh, full time, and so it was a lot of fun, and really, really enjoyed it. Some other things, I do artwork for myself, for T-shirts, for a bunch of other things that I'm working on too. Some examples. This is one I'm doing right now for a Aliens T-shirt. Um, I've got a few other examples on my iPad. This is something I'm doing for my daughter. She loves this anime called Demon Slayer, and this is one of the main characters from it. And so I went through and started drawing it. I do pictures of people. I do portraits. Here's some other stuff here. This is from The Mandalorian. And this is a cosplayer that asked me to do a picture of her as Iron Man. And so just various images that I've worked on over the last little bit here. And for the game that I was telling you about, these are some of we call these cog bots. These are some of the cog bots that I created for the game that I was working on. I wanted to kind of cover the basics of how digital art works, so that you guys could get an idea of what to use, what to look out for, kind of the applications that you should be using, and a few other, give you basically some tips and tricks so you don't end up heading down the wrong path when you first start jumping into digital art. So I'm working on an iPad, but I also have a 28-inch. It's called a Surface Studio Pro that I work on at home as well. And so the iPad, I actually do more work on the iPad than anything else, just simply because it's easier to record my drawing process and everything on an iPad than it is on a computer. And so my Surface Studio Pro, it's a great system, and it's an all-in-one Microsoft Windows system that allows me to, draw right on the screen and everything. But the biggest issues with it are actually recording my drawings. And so, because, gosh, I keep getting notifications across, even though I haven't silenced. The problem with the Surface Studio Pro is is more of the applications that it has for it. It's a full Windows system, and so I'm using Photoshop on it, and I love Photoshop. I don't have anything bad to say about Photoshop. The only thing is Photoshop isn't very mobile, and so because of that, I even have a Surface tablet as well, because I tried to jump onto that bandwagon when I got my Surface Studio, but unfortunately, the Surface doesn't have the mobility options, and more specifically, Photoshop doesn't have the mobility options that the iPad does. And so because of that, I have a tendency to use an iPad for when I'm running roundabout, and when I have time to sit down and I'm not necessarily looking to record my work in progress, then I'll jump down to my Surface Studio Pro, which has much larger screen. But as I said, I'm not able to record as much, and so because of that, I have a tendency to jump back to my iPad a lot, even when I'm at home. And so the best apps that are out there for art are, and I jump from one app to another all the time just to test them out and to see which ones I should use. But the ones that I highly recommend using are of course this one. Sorry, I keep getting notifications coming across. So there's this one, which is Procreate. So Procreate on the iPad. Now, you can only use Procreate on the iPad. And so they don't actually make a version for Windows. They don't make a version for Android. And so the only thing that's available on is the iPad. It's only available for iOS as well. It's not available for the regular Mac operating system. And so those are the negatives to it. So if you're using another tablet or another mobile application, Sketchbook Pro is a very good application. It's made by let's see, trying to remember who makes it. Sketchbook Pro is made by Autodesk. And so you can get Sketchbook Pro and it works the same, and you can download a version of it for your Mac, for your PC, and it works the same across all of those. The only thing is it's not as mobile friendly as Procreate is. And so although it's a great application and you can do a ton of things with it, I keep coming back to Procreate. And so when you're on desktop, I've used almost everything that I know of that people use out there, just because I like to test everything out. But Photoshop to me is the one that I always go back to. Other ones that you can use though are Corel Painter. So Corel Painter, sorry, my chicken scratch here. I'm going to be painting over it anyways here in a second. But Corel Painter is one of them. And then another good one that you can use. Well, Sketchbook Pro as well works on the desktop, and so you can use this both on mobile and on your desktop too. And so there's one other one, and that's I haven't used this one in quite a while. There's SAI, and then there's there's one I did some brush tutorials in a little while ago. But anyways, there's a ton of free options out there. But I don't really have negative to say about almost any art application if you can figure out how to use it, because you can create art with almost anything. And so a lot of people like to bag on digital artists because they think that digital artists, for some reason, don't have the ability to do traditional methods, and that's not necessarily true. And in some cases, it's just another tool in an artist's, handbag. I was actually, I started out doing everything traditional. I actually got into oil painting. I loved oil painting. It was my favorite art form. But when my son turned 3 years old and ruined one of my oil paintings that I was in progress on, and some furniture and carpet and walls, and I decided to make the jump over to digital at that point. And I started out just by sketching stuff at first, and then scanning a picture in, and then painting it in Photoshop. And then I went to full on getting tablets and learning to draw from a tablet onto the computer screen. And then I got the full computer tablet based systems. And that's when I've really that's when I really have fun. The problem is I've tried to go back to traditional a couple of times, and the problem with traditional is that it doesn't offer some of the features that you have on I mean, I'm when I'm trying to do traditional, when I even try to sketch, sometimes I'll see myself going down with my fingers and pinching to zoom in, and it's funny because you definitely can't do that, but yet I'm finding myself trying to use digital means on a traditional method, and so I love painting digital. I enjoy it a lot, and basically what this course is going to cover is showing you how to do it and showing you some things that are very common between all applications, between all of these applications too. So you're not just limited to Procreate, but I'm going to spend the majority of my time inside Procreate. So for those of you that have iPads and Procreate, you'll be able to learn some of the features that are available here in Procreate as well. And so, okay, so with that said, what I'm going to do first is teach you the general. I'm going to go over kind of the general benefits of working digital that you don't have traditional. And so traditional, you normally, when you draw, you can't go back and delete it. You have to, like if you're drawing with a pencil, you can use your eraser to erase it. But even then, you're sometimes limited because there's only a certain amount of time that a piece of paper will allow you to erase. And so, but that's where we get into layers with digital. So you can see I've sketched out, I've written out these names of these applications on here, but I can easily turn these off and add a new layer and then draw something completely different on here. And so that's one of the biggest benefits, is that you can work in layers and all the benefits that layers provide. Because, for example, here I'm working on this layer, but I want to change my background color. And so I can go to my background layer, or in Photoshop or another application, I can just simply fill the layer with a color. And that way I can have a background layer, and then I can go and add an additional layer to that and start drawing or painting on that layer. And so one of the workflows I like to do is to go to a midpoint in my background color, so like a mid-tone gray, and then I will take that mid-tone gray and throw it down onto the screen, and then I'll go to the layer above and paint and sketch in a darker black color. And so I'm just going to go over a few things as I'm painting. There's some brushes that you can use. I download a ton of brushes all the time to test them out. I've currently been playing around with all these oil brushes, but for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to go in and just go to use some of the basic brushes that come with Procreate. And so I'm just going to go in and choose some of the sketching tools that they have from here and work with those. And so in Procreate, you can easily choose, like they have sketching, inking, drawing, painting, and you can alternate between these as you're working on it. Or if you download your own brushes or make your own brushes, you can find what you really work with. Really, most artists only work with a couple of brushes and stay with those brushes throughout the entire process. But then they'll get other brushes to modify and work with their paintings as they're doing them, maybe to add in texture or to make a process go a little bit faster, like painting grass or painting leaves on a tree. They might go and put together a brush that helps them go faster. The main reason why you go digital is to take, well, the main reason why I went to digital is to take advantage of the speed that comes with digital. Because really, as an artist, you're competing against big production studios and everything. And the only way an artist can really keep up is by figuring out ways to speed up their art. And traditionally, you can create things pretty quick, but digitally, it offers some very compelling reasons to make it even faster. And so I have a tendency to sketch just like a normal artist would, because I come from a traditional background. And so when I sketch, I use gestures a lot of times. And all I'm trying to do right here is draw a perfect circle. Now, the thing is I can draw this perfect circle by doing the traditional way, which is drawing around a whole bunch of lines and gesturing it out. But the cool thing about Procreate is you can draw a circle, and then if you press and hold, it will, I'm shaking just a little bit, so that didn't work. But let me do it again. Okay, if you press and hold after you get to the end of your circle, it will turn into a perfectly formed circle that you can then expand or contract down depending on what you want to do with it. You can do this with many shapes inside Procreate. So for example, if I want to do a triangle, I can go and draw a basic triangle and then hold it, and it will straighten out all the lines for me. But you'll see it's keeping the paintbrush still on my sketch mode and making it look like it was sketched out instead of just holding the shape. Another advantage is drawing straight lines. If you draw a line and then you hold it, it will go straight. And so if I'm drawing a sword or a polearm or some sort of mech unit, I can use this to my advantage to quickly create some straight lines instead of relying on trying my best to get a straight line by a quick drag or something like that. And so that's another advantage of it too, is that you can take advantage of some of these features. In addition, you can quickly fill things as well. And so you saw that I grabbed my swatch at the beginning and filled the entire layer. But if I've enclosed this circle here, I can then grab this swatch. Oh, that didn't work. Let me actually add a new layer, and then I'll do it with a more solid brush, because the problem is I'm using a sketching brush to fill with, and there's probably minute little holes in that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to, I'll go over and use an inking brush instead. And so we'll use this fading edge as my brush, and I'll turn off my previous layer, and we'll go in and draw this. We'll do a circle again. And then with that, I can just quickly go in and drag and drop the color straight into it. And so that speeds up your process a lot, because you don't have to go in and actually paint in everything. You could just go in and drag and drop a color right into place, and you're good to go. And so, but let's say I want to go with a little bit lighter of a color because I don't want it to go all completely dark. I can then go and drag another color into it, and it will make it just a little bit lighter. And if I'm still not satisfied, I can go even lighter than that. And so from here, I'm going to go in and I'm going to go back to my sketching brush. But another advantage of working with layers is the fact that you can actually lock certain things. So I could come in here. So let me show you. I want to try to make this look like a three-dimensional object. And so to do that, I've got to have a light source. And so we're going to have the light coming in off, like coming from this direction. And so what I'm going to do is go in and select a lighter value. I'm not going to go all the way to white. I'm actually going to go just a little bit more than what my midpoint is. And we'll come over here and just sketch in where my midpoint is. I'm going to switch brushes though, just because it's not blending the way I want it to right now. And so let me just go down and do the Procreate pencil this time. Okay, so I sketched that out, and now let's go in and take my dark. So I'll take almost a black point there, and we'll go in and sketch this. Well, the problem is while I'm sketching this, I'm going outside of the lines. And this is traditional. You're used to having to try to stay in the lines. But when you're working with digital, I'm going to undo this, and you undo in Procreate by hitting two fingers on the tablet or going down in this lower part. It's down in this area right here. You have an undo and a redo from here. And so, but what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll actually click on right here on the image on the layer palette. And once I click on that, it brings up this menu here. And this menu, I'm going to choose Alpha Lock. What Alpha Lock does is everything that does not have color already on it, it locks down. So I can't color over it. And so I'll go in now and I'll sketch in that black, the shadow that I'm trying to make. I'll sketch that in and going around the edges, and you'll see it doesn't go beyond because I turn that alpha lock on. And so that's another advantage. And then, of course, zooming in and zooming out. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start blending this together. And so Procreate offers a lot of blending options. I was using oils before, so I'm going to switch back to my sketching and choose a blender that I really like called Elderman. And then I'll just go in and I'll blend this. So instead of taking the time to go in and select different values, I can use the blending tools to quickly get to the value that I'm looking for by just simply blending it in. And with my alpha lock on, you'll notice I'm not, even though I'm drawing beyond the boundaries of the circle here, I can draw beyond it, and the color won't go in because of the alpha lock. And so now I'll do the same with my white. I'll go in here with this white that I painted. And if I make the brush larger, this is where you make the brush larger, and this is the opacity of the brush. And so I'll make my brush larger, and that way I can get some bigger blends going out and across. And then I'll start blending those out. And you can do this, or you can go in and just touch, and you can select another value range, and then you can paint that in there. And I'm on a small brush, so I'll make it a little bit bigger so that this will go a little bit faster. Okay. Okay, so I'm about there, but I'm going to do just a little bit more blending. I'm going to bring my blending brush down so I don't quite have to do so much. Sorry, I think I know where let me switch back real quick to get these alerts turned off. This new operating system, still getting used to it. It's right here. Okay, let me go in, do not disturb. There we go. Okay. Okay, back to this. I'm going to go in and finish blending this out so that it's kind of a smooth blend. One of the disadvantages of Procreate is they don't have an extremely easy way to make a gradient. And so you have to put paint down and blend it, or you have to be familiar with some of the more advanced options and do a gradient map. And so I'm not going to hook you up to the fire hose with that yet. Maybe towards the end I could show some features like that. But anyways, okay. So that's an okay job. There's still some blending that could be done to make it look a little bit prettier. But I'm not going to bore you with just drawing a circle the whole time. And so some other realistic things that we may want to do is getting the light that bounces off the surface that this might be on. And so I'm going to go in and select a value that isn't as bright as the white, and then I'll go around this edge with it so that we get a little bit of bounce back of the light from the surface. And then we'll blend that in just a little bit too. And so anyway, so that's how you can quickly go in and get some of the values and colors that you're looking for, and work with the advantages of the digital platform. The other thing you can do too is you can draw masks. And so if you've used airbrushing before, if you've done anything with airbrushing, I'm going to go on and turn off the alpha lock. Well, actually, I'm not. I'm just going to go underneath this layer and add a new layer underneath so I can do a shadow. And so But what you can do here is you can draw masks very similar to what you can do with airbrushing and masking tape, but it's a lot quicker because it's digital. And so what we'll do is we'll go into an ellipse. We'll just choose an ellipse as our mask, and then we'll go in and draw our mask out as if it's a shadow that's coming off of this because of the way the light is coming down. And so we can draw that mask, and then you can go in and feather it out. And so when you feather it out, what that does is it makes the edges so that they're not quite so solid. And so what I'm going to do here is go to black, and then I'm just going to drag and drop that down in there. And so that's what it, and then let me go off the mask. If I click off the mask there, that's what it looks like here. But another advantage to layers is that then I can go into this layer. If I click on that N, you'll see this little N here. That's saying that it's using a normal blending mode right now. And so if I click that N, I can then reduce the opacity of this layer to get down to about what I'm looking for the strength of my shadow. And so that might be a little too strong. So I'll bring it down just a little bit more. There we go. Okay. So that's quickly an overview of how to work with your layers. There's a ton of additional features that you can do on layers as well, such as if I click on here, you'll see you've got the ability to mask a layer. You can use a layer as a mask. And let me show you how that works, because these all come into play as you're drawing. And the more you know, the quicker it's going to be for you to work with these. And so I'm going to go in and I'm going to turn off alpha lock on this layer. And then I'm going to go on and do a layer mask. So all I have to do is click on that layer and then click on mask. And then you'll see a new layer, a new white and black layer appear above this layer, but they're grouped together. And so all I need to do is get on that layer. So I will come back in here, click on that layer. And with me being on that layer, I'm drawing in pure black and white. And with pure black, black actually will hide. Let me get a brush. Okay. Black will actually hide the layer, while white, if I switch this to pure white, white will reveal. And so I'm not actually deleting anything. I'm going in and masking part of it out, but then I'm bringing stuff back. This is really useful if you're doing something with a client and they're like, well, I don't like this bush, or I don't like this tree there, or whatever the case may be. You can go in and create a layer mask and mask it out. And then you can go back in, and if they say, well, you know what, I kind of did like that tree, let's bring that tree back. You don't have to suddenly go back and redraw it. You can just mask it out, and then you can use white to bring it back. And so black hides, and then the white reveals when you're working with layer mask. And then you can use shades of gray to do semi-transparent and semi-opaque things. And so anyways, so that's what a layer mask does. Let me go over a couple other features that you have here. So you also have the ability to invert. So if you're ever working with something and you need to reverse the colors, you can click on invert and it will switch the colors out. So I'm going to undo that because I don't actually like the way that looks. But that comes in handy, especially if you need to quickly change the values in it. You can use reference images. You can merge layers down. Merging layers down comes in real handy when you're trying to work everything on the same layer. I all the time will add a new layer and a new layer and a new layer, but then when I need to blend them together, you can only do blending on one layer at a time. And so because of that, I have a tendency to quickly condense my layers down to a single layer so that I can do blending, but then I'll add new layers. And so I'm constantly going to merge the layers down to each other. The cool thing about this application, though, is that it's 100% built for mobile. So if I want to merge a lot of layers together, I'll turn on that other layer so you can see this how it all comes together. I can take all of these layers and just pinch them down into a single layer, and it takes a little bit of work. But once you pinch them down into a single layer, now it's just one layer that you're working with. And so you took all of those layers and just, converted them to a single layer from there for easy blending or whatever case you may be. I went and undid that, but just to show you, that's how easy it is to put those layers together. And so, okay, so other advantages that you have to working with digital is, let me take off this layer mask because it's hiding some of my image that I drew there, and I'll turn off that background layer there too. Now here, if I want to add color to this, normally, and especially coming from an oil painting background, I would go in and do my oil paints with like a burnt sienna or a burnt umber, and I'd go in and do an underpainting, which is essentially a value painting of the colors that I'm about ready to put onto it. But it just covers all the values, like what I have here. This is just a black and white value painting of a circle. Now, if I want to, I can go in and I can paint over this in opaque layers. In transparent layers, to steadily add color to it the way I would if I were glazing within oils. But I don't need to do that. There's features within this application that allow you to go in and actually paint right onto the circle and bring those colors down in. And so this will also give me another chance to show you some additional layer features that you have. One of them is called a clipping. You can do a clipping mask. And so a clipping mask, what this does, well, let me undo that. I need to add a new layer first. So I'll add a new layer, but then I'll go in and select clipping mask. What that does is it makes it so that everything on here is masked. Everything on this layer is masked to whatever is underneath it. And so let me give an example of this. I'll go in with red now, and I'll just paint, and I'm going to choose a brush that can go much larger. So I'm going to go into my painting now, my painting brushes, and we'll just choose the acrylic brush here. And so I can go much larger on my acrylic brush, and I can quickly cover a large section with this brush. So I painted over that circle, but because it's in a clipping mask, it's clipped to the painting underneath it, which is great because the only thing I want to change color on this is just that circle that I painted. And so now what I can do is click on that N again. So if I hit that N, all of these things underneath that say darken, color burn, all of these are blending modes. And these blending modes, I can start blending this color that's on this clipping mask down into the painting underneath it. And so like some of the ones that use probably the most are multiply. Multiply is one of and that multiply is under, and you'll see that little thing that had an N on it is now going to M, which stands for multiply. And so multiply, what it does is it takes the color that's on top and it merges with the color underneath, and it darkens everything based off the value of that color that you're using. And so you'll notice it went darker. Well, let's say you want to paint in color, but you don't want it going darker because you want it to actually be the color that you want it, that you're working with. And so another blending mode you can use is color. Color will take the color that you're blending it down in, and it won't make it any darker. It will just turn all the colors underneath it, or all the values underneath it, to that color. And so that's what color does. It's one of the ones I use a lot in addition to multiply. And if you want to go on the light side of things, you can experiment with these to your heart's content, because there are a ton of things you can do with these. And these are in Photoshop and they're in Procreate. And so you don't have to you don't have to just be using Procreate to be able to take advantage of this. Most other drawing and painting applications have these blending modes and have all these features that I've shown up to this point. There's just different ways to use them. And because of the popularity of iPads, that's the main reason why I'm sticking to Procreate for this tutorial. And so, but some of the other ones you can use, especially if you want to lighten things, you can go to lighten or screen. Screen is the one I like to use the most when I'm going to lighten things. But let me show you how this works if you were to use multiple layers to achieve a result. So what I would do is I'd first go in and paint my color in using multiply. So that's how a multiply layer would look. But then I could create a new layer and I could switch this to screen. Let me go over to screen. And then I can use the exact same color. I don't even have to change my colors. And then with that selected to screen, I could go in and just paint down. And with screen, it automatically lightens the image that it lightens the colors that I'm using. And then I can use my blending to blend that in to get a real light spot on there. And then let's say I want to get a nice colored edge on the other side. So what I can do is I can also turn this into a clipping mask. And so I will just go and select clipping mask, and that clips it. And you'll notice that this clips it not to what's underneath it. It clips it all the way down to the painting underneath because I've got two clipping masks stacked on top of each other. And so now what I can do is I can go in and do a little bit of the, that's too big of a brush. So let me bring the brush down first. And then I can go in and paint the edge here to make a little bit of that light bouncing off the ground. And then I can blend it out just a little bit because, you know, even though I did it, even though I got the look that I'm going for, the edges don't look quite as good as I'd like them to. And so there you go. That's how you can take these layers and use them to your advantage. But and that's how you can speed up the process, because you don't have to these alerts keep coming up. You don't have to change. I mean, you don't have to go in and just keep your hand real steady, or you don't have to go in and use masking tape or anything like that. The advantage to digital is you've got quick methods to achieve similar results to what you could do with regular, with traditional methods. And so, okay, so hopefully you're soaking that in. I'm wondering, am I able to open this up to questions over voice chat, or do they have to type in the questions? I don't know if the moderator's still here. Okay, well, if you have any questions, then feel free to send them across, and I'll take them as I can. I know that was a lot to go in all at once, but I kind of wanted to get everyone in a, kind of on a level playing field of knowing what they're working with. The other thing I'd like to cover is putting in texture. Putting in texture, you can do it in multiple ways. You can paint in your texture. Like, if I wanted to spend a lot of detail on this, I could go in and, let's say I wanted to make it more of a rough surface. So I could go in with my sketch brush, or I could choose another brush like this Nico rule, and I could go in and you could see how this adds in texture to it. But I could reduce the opacity, and then I could go through and just paint in the texture just lightly over the top of this. And you could see that it has an effect of making the light look like it's bouncing off of texture as we're painting this in. I could add it to one of these different masks, one of these different clipping masks, or I could there's other ways to do it, and that's just if you really want to paint it all yourself, then you can do that too. You can just take one of your basic brushes and go in, and the opacity on this brush is turned up entirely too much. So I'm going to go back and bring this down so I can simulate the same thing. So if I were to try to simulate this texture, I'd be going in and painting my line work and maybe even reducing the opacity further and painting it in and then blending. And that's how traditionally, not even traditionally, that's how you could do texture digitally in here. Or you could find some good brushes like that. Like here, I've got one called Hyperrealism. This is for skin. This is what I would traditionally use for skin. And so when I go in and do this and paint this down, it adds just a slight texture to my brush. And you can see that texture when I paint hard with it. But the advantage of this is that I can paint very light with it, or I could reduce the opacity if it's going too dark by what I'm doing. And it can give me a slight texture to this without going real hard. Or I can go back and use my Nyko rule again, and it will go in and paint that rougher texture that you're looking for there. And so, and I'm doing this using that one blending mode. But let's say I want to get some real fine points of highlight on here. And so I'm going to go in, create another clipping mask because I don't want to actually go outside of my layer. And then let's do a completely different color here this time. Let's go in and let's say our light is kind of warm that's coming in. And because it's warm, I'll want to get some warmer spots on here. And so I'll go in and start painting that color on this layer. And so, excuse me, I'm still on that hyperrealism. So I'm switching back to my basics brush. So I can kind of get I'm using Photoshop shortcuts to try to make it bigger. So there's my big warm spot for my light. And then what I can do is I can go lighter and lighter, or I can switch the blending mode and go lighter. I'm just going to, for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to make it lighter myself. And so we have a real bright highlight. And then I'm going to blend this out just a little bit because it's a little bit hard edged on that edge. And so we're going to blend this out a little bit. I kind of like the hard center, but I'm going to blend the top and the bottom to make it more look like a light. And then we might have just a little bit, since the light's going to reflect, normally if you have a warm highlight, you want to go with a opposite. I'm doing an opposite color wheel so I can get a little bit different of a color blending in. But I'm going to go in and select the blue and add another layer to this. Let's do it as a clipping mask as well. And so we'll select this, choose clipping mask, and then let's get that edge here in the shadow area. Let's get it going a little bit cooler. And then we'll get some of these dark areas going a little bit cooler as well. And so all we have to do from here, though, is blend it out. And we've got a nice warm highlight and some nice cool shadows coming in. But we don't want to lose completely the reflected light that's going off of that edge. And so you can bring this in, and then you can reduce the opacity to blend it in even further. And so I'm just trying to get a nice smooth color going around. And so now what I do is I could go in here and I could try to do a multiply, but the multiply goes too dark. And so I'll probably keep it normal, but what I'll do is I'll just reduce the opacity on it to bring out a little bit of that cool color. And then I'll sample a color down here and I'll add a new layer again. and I'll go in and add a little bit of that warmth to the edge. I've got to make it a clipping mask. So you can see there what happens when you don't. You'll actually paint outside. The cool thing is I can actually use that as my guide. So let me go back. I can create a clipping mask afterwards. I don't have to do it before I paint. And so I'll go in and do that edge with a little bit of warmth in it. Okay, so there we go. We got our edge going in there. And now I'll go in and I'll click on the picture and choose clipping mask. And you can see it clips it straight to that edge. Now it's a little bit harsh, and so we'll blend it out just a tiny bit. I use blending a lot, where some people will just go in and use an airbrush. I have a tendency to blend. And so you can use an airbrush, and especially if you're familiar with airbrushes, you can just spread out your airbrush, and they do have airbrushes in here. As a matter of fact, I'll go and show you how you could do this with airbrushes. And so here's your airbrush. Choose a real soft brush, and then you hit that edge. Let me turn off that layer, and we'll create a new one. And we'll do a clipping mask. And then you go over the edges. Oh, that's a big airbrush. I'll bring that down a little bit. Let's make sure we're good there. Okay. And we are. And then you can just go over the edge. And if you've got very steady hands, which I don't, you can hit that edge real nicely by hitting this outer portion. I'm going to blend it anyways, but I'm not as good with the airbrush. And so then you can go and blend this out. And so you've also got other features on here. So instead of using blending all the time, what you might want to do instead is go over into the effects. I didn't mean to hit my mask. Go over into the effects, and you can use your Gaussian blur, and you can Gaussian blur the layer. And Gaussian blur, you just slide your finger across to adjust the blur, and it will actually help to blend any of your effects out just a little bit. And so that's another advantage of going digital, is that you can use all these tools at your leisure to help you out with your drawing process. And then you can use the opacity to blend down. Okay, well, I've spent nearly half the class drawing a circle, and that doesn't really show you a ton on how to paint or how to arrive at a certain conclusion for an image. And so what I'm going to do is, there's another game that I'm helping someone out with, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start creating the cover for that, so you can see my process, and I can show you some ways to take all of these other things that I've shown up to this point and demonstrate them for you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a midtone, and I don't like painting on a white canvas because normally you're not going to have your images on just pure white. You're going to have them on some sort of a color, and so it's good to mimic whatever color you're going to be going into. And because I'm used to Photoshop and not necessarily Procreate, I normally don't use the background color. I'll select my color from up there, but you can do the same with your background color. Just to show you, you can select your background color, and you can use the disc, and you can go in and select a midtone, and it works just as easily. And that way you don't need to have an extra layer in there. But I do things the way I do them because I'm a little bit crazy. So I'll go back to my sketching. We'll choose the Procreate pencil, and we'll start sketching this out. What this game is about is there's I'm not going to give the game away because it's something that's still being created. But there's monsters involved, there's a graveyard involved, and there's people running away from the monster involved. And so because of that, I'm going to go in and start figuring out the position of my monster. I'm probably only going to be able to get the face done in this, but I will go ahead and show you how I arrive at that through drawing, and then I will try my best to get everything done on the face before the end of the class, and I'll talk you through the whole process too. So there's multiple ways to sketch. One of the easiest ways to sketch is to get your brush as big as you can get it, and then I still gesture. I do a lot of gesturing based off of my previous work that I did. And so what I'm doing is I'm doing a bird's eye view. So bird's eye is looking from the top down, and I'm going to do a bird's eye view of this character. Now, the thing is I notice all the time when I start to draw, I draw very big, and then I have a tendency to reduce. We're going to do a little forced perspective on this character. So this is its head. This is its shoulders right here. And then we're narrowing down to the waist, and then the feet and the hips and everything are going to be down in this area. And he's running forward. And so to run forward, he's got to have one leg out and one leg back. And we could do the comic book thing where they over exaggerate it. And so if he's running forward, he's going to be hunched over a little bit more than I have him. And so I'm making these decisions on the fly. And so because of that, I'm going to have to redraw over a little bit as I'm planning. But I think of a gesture as kind of a blueprint for a drawing. And so it's not finalized. And so I can keep sketching over it until I'm pretty sure I'm getting close to where I want to be. And then I'll go in and I'll start adding in the details. But right now, I'm still just gesturing. So I'm going to have a little bit of forced perspective on this because his hands, he's going to be coming towards the viewer with his hands reaching out like he's going to grab them. And so I'm drawing the hands here real close. And then the forearm is going to show up a little bit like that. And then right here is where the deltoid is, and the shoulder where it connects. There's the deltoid on the other side. Now, admittedly, I'm drawing this guy a little bit buff, so I'll probably have to tone that back a little bit. But comic books, you draw in comic book style, and you can never seem to go back. So now I'm going to draw his feet running forward. So this is the calf, the leg right there, the knees right there. Other knee's going to be back here, and calf back here. And then his other hand is going to be out here. So here I want a little bit more character to it. So I'm going to change his fingers just a little bit. I'm going to have this finger lifted up. Because it's forced perspective, you've got to always take that into consideration. So and as it's going back, it's going to get a little bit smaller. And then we'll draw. And in this case, you may only see, two segments of his finger because of how forced it is. Now I'm going to take this pinky and force it in just a little bit more. And then here's his thumb. And he's going to be a vampire, so I'm going to give him a little bit of claws. Okay. So, and then there's his hand. He's going to have this lace going around his cuff. And so I'm going to show that lace coming out just a little bit. Okay. So I got his hand good. Now I need to go back and start getting everything else. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a neck on him. And we're going to put his head just a little bit further up. So you can see his face good. Okay. Now his head is a little big compared to his body right now, but he's also leaning over. And so I'll continue to work on that as I reduce the buffness on his arms and a few other things that I have a tendency to do. Okay, so once I'm good, once I know that I'm good with the look that I'm doing, I go back in and clean up. Now, some artists, they prefer not to work on their sketch layer. They'll actually go in and redraw their lines. But because I don't necessarily mind working on my sketch layer, I have a tendency to just go in and erase and then finalize lines as I get going. And plus, I'm not inking this on this layer, and so and I don't know if I'm going to use an inking layer anyways. And so because of that, I'm just going to use those base lines because sometimes I'm still not completely solid on the form before I get my final. Okay, so there's the calf, back part, foot, back part. And we'll start getting some anatomy drawn in here a little bit. His bicep. Wrist. His other hand. This is where his thumb will be. Have that coming in just a little bit. Okay, so we got kind of the basics here. Now I've got to over exaggerate his face. So when you're drawing, especially when you're drawing from above, it's real good to put down a grid for the face because and I'm going to reduce the size of my brush because it's going too dark too fast, and so and real thick, and so and I want to be able to see my lines a little more clearly. Now I'm at a very low resolution right now, but so I'd up the resolution normally at this point. I'd go into Photoshop and just increase the resolution. You weren't able to increase the resolution inside of Procreate previously, but now they've actually got features inside that allow you to do that. So we'll give him Big Widow's Peak. So, and you can use your blending brush at this point too to reduce some of those lines. Sometimes it's quicker than having to erase everything. And so, he's a vampire, so I'm going to give him some sharp, pointy ears. Yeah, I put the ears a little too far back. Okay, and then we'll go in and we'll make a nice hawk-like nose. And I'll zoom in on the face now so you can see a little bit of the detail as I'm working on it. Okay, we're getting his. As I was saying, with the grid, especially with faces, you want to get your midpoints down. Now this is going to be kind of cartoony, and so because of that, I don't have to be pixel perfect on this for the first go round. And you'll find that a lot of times if you draw and you're just drawing something kind of by itself, you might go a little too big or a little too small. But that's another advantage of working with digital is you can go big and small, and then you can cut their head off and you can resize it. And so I don't mind cutting my drawings heads off. I do it all the time, and so kind of good at it by now. So we're going to elongate out his chin just a little bit, have that come in, go like that, and then we'll have him have an extra long area under his nose. And I'm going to actually have his mouth open further, so I'm going to have to actually move all this down a little bit further. And I am going to be cutting this guy's head off and making it smaller because his head's getting way too big right now. I will sometimes lay out the muscles on the face as I'm drawing, just because you've got a jelly bean right here for your mouth. And so I make sure that I don't go outside that, even when I'm doing cartoonish things. And let me resize his head because it's driving me nuts. So when you're on your mask, you got to make sure if you used ellipse or any of those things previously that you go back to freehand. And freehand, what it allows you to do is you can simply just draw lines. And so I'm going to go in and draw, and then you come back to the original point and click, and then it has masked that out. And now what I can do is with 3 fingers, I just pull downward and I do cut and paste. And what that did is in my layers, it put his head on an entirely different layer. So now I can select the head and move it around, cut it off, move it around, and resize it. And so, okay, now let me get that other eye in there because I've drawn one of the eyes, but the other eye. And then let's make him mad because he's chasing after some people and he wants to get them. So we'll bring his eyebrows down and furl up his brow. Maybe put his eyes a little bit higher. I went just a little too low. Okay. And then I'll go in and start erasing a lot of these. I call them construction lines. I'll go in and start erasing some of the construction lines so that they're not influencing my drawing too much. And so I'll keep that little bit of a jaw muscle in there. And then we'll go back here and we'll start making sure that the ear is positioned right. He's going to be a vampire, so he's going to have fangs. Okay. Oh, a little too big. Bring that down. Okay, so once you're, and I'm speeding through this process, so I'm normally a little bit more careful than I'm being here, but once you're at a process where you're about ready to start adding in value, a good rule of thumb is to make sure that I selected a color, but it wasn't dark enough. To make sure that every pixel is covered, because it stinks when you get drawing and then you go back and you find out that there's an area that wasn't covered because you went too quickly over it or whatever the case may be. It happens to the best of us. And so what you do is you just add a layer underneath. So you can take a layer, add it underneath, and then you take a little bit darker than what your midtone is. So I'll go select the midtone, and then I'll go just a little bit darker than that. And then underneath, I will increase my brush size. I may switch over to a painting brush because the painting brushes can go a lot bigger. I have a tendency to like my basic brush the best because it's solid. It's completely solid. And I'm not looking for texture at this point. I'm just more looking to cover the area with paint so that I don't get too premature with my color and with my value at this point. I'm going to turn off the body because it's distracting me too much. And so, like I said, I was mainly going to work on the head because I know what I'm capable of doing within the amount of time that we have. And so I'm going to do the head and his neck coming in and show you how to work on value, color, and then polish. And we have about 45 minutes to do that. So what I'm going to do now that I have color underneath all of that, I'm going to merge these layers together. Merging 2 layers together in Procreate can be a challenge sometimes because you have to twist your fingers as you're pulling them together. or you could just click on it and click merge down, and that's an easier way. But anyways, okay, so now I've got to think about where my light's coming from. So I'm going to want light coming probably, and I like drawing the arrows on just because it helps remind me uh, where my light source is coming. And so I'm gonna do the traditional from the top left down. And so because of that, I'm gonna select a darker color first, and I'm gonna go in and start getting where all my shadows are gonna be. And so from here, I'm just gonna quickly go in and sketch out where my shadows are gonna be because of where the light is. I'm gonna quickly get those in there. And he'll have a little bit of light on that jaw right there. And because he's a vampire, I make him a little bit gaunt, and so his cheekbones are going to be really prominent right there. And then I'm going to give him a little bit of a shadow on his nose. Go down here. Make his lips curl down just a little bit more. And then I'll go in with my blending brush and I'll start blending everything in. Once I start blending, that's when the real it starts to pick up some of the realism from here, because once you start blending, that's when it starts looking just a little bit more realistic and coming together. And so now you'll notice I don't have any highlights in this yet. I sometimes go to highlights too early, so now I religiously avoid them. I work on just the slightly below mid-tone value until the very end, and then I add my highlights. And so, but I'm going to try to do that as quickly as I can because I want you guys to have a semi-finished face. I want to show you guys a semi-finished face before I'm done. And um, so I'm going to try to get to that as quickly as possible. And by the way, you can feel free afterwards to message me. You can reach me at my on my email. If you look up Den Dorrity on any social media, you'll find me. But my email is dendoherty at doherty.net. So you can feel free to reach out to me on that. If you have any questions or you want any advice, I'm more than willing to take a look at people's portfolios and tell you how they're looking and what you could do to help. You know what you could do to help push things a little bit further. Um, and I'd also be interested in hearing what you thought about this class that I'm teaching today. And so, um, okay, so you're starting to see the face come out here, but because it's so dark, you're not seeing a ton with it yet. And so, but I'm getting there as quickly as I can, and I'll go around and start cleaning some things up as I'm doing it, so I don't have necessarily all these extra lines going everywhere. Because the light's coming from that side of the face, I got to make sure he's got some shadows on this other side of his neck. Okay, and I'm just trying to get some of the finer details in there too, because some of these I'm not going to be blending. I'm going to be keeping them the way they are. Give them some real bushy eyebrows. I'm going to give him a big widow's peak. So this is going to go back real far and then come back down. Okay. make his ear just a little more prominent than we had previously. Okay, so I'm getting there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in to some of my areas and I'm going to start adding in the lighter values into it where I think light's going to be popping through. And so like right here on the upper part of the eyebrow, I'm going to probably put a rim light going around the edge of his face right here. It's also going to be going off of his brow, a little bit on his eyebrows, and off of his forehead, and then down here. And of course, off of his teeth. We got to have the rim light on his teeth. Okay, so you can see where that's at now. So what I'm going to do is just blend in those a little bit. I'm going to reduce the size of my blender just by a tiny amount because I'm not trying to push around the paint quite so much. And then I'm going to lighten the value up. Now, this is going to look real light, but the funny thing is this is just barely hitting about the same color. Well, it's a little bit lighter than the background, but it's just barely a little bit lighter. And so it looks white though, because we're painting on a colored background. And so I'll use this to showcase I'll go all the way to white now and get my rim light in there, just because that's going to give me my edge. And I want to see my edge real good. Okay. And then I'll get the corner of his eye, get some of these eyebrows. Gosh, I keep saying eyelashes. And then we'll get some of his hair over here in the rim light. Okay. Now I use my blending brushes a lot, as I've said previously. I will go in and sometimes use them to do things that some artists would prefer to not use blending brushes for, but I do it a lot, and so. But I don't know if it's because I push around. When I was painting in oils, I had a tendency to push around the paint and mix the paint on the canvas, which drove one of my teachers insane. He hated the fact that I did that. But in my mind, I was successful at what I did, and so it worked for me. So I still do similar process, but there's probably a faster way to arrive at those conclusions than always blending. And so if you're doing concept art too, you want to get out of the habit of blending all the time, because a lot of times your brush strokes are, as you put them down, those are your final brush strokes. And so you don't want to. And as I was doing game work, I had to work that out in my mind a lot, because I had a tendency to put a little too much down, a little too many blends down. So I'm getting those cheeks to stand out real good, making sure that light is showing real good. Okay, how much time? I've got about 20 minutes to try to complete this face, so I'm going to speed through this. So I'm blending all this in, and then I'm going to add one more layer of highlights, and and we'll call it good enough for now. Got that real prominent cheekbone going on there. And then down here, I need to make that chin stand out just a little bit more because I want him to have a little bit of a angular face. I could bring his chin down to a point, I guess. But I won't. I like the square chin vampires. Okay, so now I'm going to add one more layer of highlights. Now, a light that almost comes out even in the darkest is up in the corner of the eyes, right in there. It has a tendency to shine even in the darkest of times. And so I went a little too light. I'm going to bring it back down just a tiny bit. Okay. Brightest points that you draw on faces are normally around the nose, down around the bottom lip, and around the eyes. And then you can get some, and then a lot just depends on how your light's hitting it. But if you hit those spots, your image will have a tendency to look a little more realistic. Okay. I'm going to open up his eyes just a little bit more because he looks like he's a drowsy vampire. And I want him to look a little more upset. Here we go. Okay, so I could work on this for hours, but I'm going to go ahead and call it quits for now on the valve. Well, I'm going to blend in just a little bit more of this so that we can get that good light right there on the edge. And then I'm going to put a tiny bit of highlight right there in his nose too. I got to get a little bit of light right there on his nose just so that it's capturing a tiny bit of light. And then we'll emphasize the furrowed brow. Okay, so another thing that you can get lost in digital painting is if you're zoomed in too close. And it's something that I have to constantly remind myself is to not stay extremely zoomed in, or else I'll end up spending a lot of time on detail that no one's really going to catch. And so, and that's a constant thing I have to do to myself because sometimes that much detail doesn't matter. And even though you can, spruce up some things a little bit more, you may not want to. And so I'm going to put some light around his eye there too, so that it'll allow me to do some good color on it. He looks a little cross-eyed right now, but I'll fix that. Okay, so there's my basic black and white. And so now what I can do is I can go in and I can add color to this very easily because I've got all my black and white values down. I just simply go over here, click a plus to add a new layer to it, and then I choose the color of his skin. And so he's going to be kind of pale, but we're going to go into the more the kind of pinkish red values, but we're going to stay over in this less saturated area and choose a color. Maybe we'll even go a little more pinkish and choose a color somewhere in there. Okay, now from here, I'm going to choose a blending mode on this layer of, I'm going to actually go in and put this one on multiply. And so this is going to make everything underneath it just a little bit darker. But the other thing I'm going to do, because I know that I've covered all my pixels on there, I'm going to turn this into a clipping mask so that I can draw outside the layer and I don't have to worry about it. So I'll take my clipping mask and then I'll go in and I'll start throwing this color down. It's going to make everything darker, so you got to be prepared for that it's going to make everything darker. The only way to go lighter is by choosing a lighter color. So if I decided that, oh, am I on the right layer? Okay, for some reason. I must have erased. I figured out right here, I must have actually erased that. The bad thing about the Apple Pencil is as you're using it, it will occasionally switch over to an eraser and you won't realize it until you start coloring. And then when you color and you end up with a weird color like what I was getting there, it shows you that was actually erased. And so I'm going to go into the hairline just a little bit, even though his hair is going to be largely dark. I'm just going to cover that hairline to make sure. And then what you can do to start going lighter is just bring this up. And once you bring it up and you paint over that, you'll see it will start bringing your values up. Now, I don't want to just have a pale vampire and that's it. And so I'm going to add some additional colors into this. I'm going to start thinking about what my light source is and the warmth that's going to be brought on by the light and the dark that's going to be brought on by those lights too. And if they're going to be warm or cool. And I'm probably going to go with a warm, I'm probably going to go with more of a warm light, making my shadows a little bit darker. And so, making my shadows cooler, sorry. Okay. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is go in and start getting those colors in. So if I'm going to go warmer, I'm going to go into this area here. I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. We'll saturate it just a little bit more too, so that when we draw this warmth on, it will come in. And once again, just go lighter if you want a lighter color. And you can also use other blending modes and other layers to help bring out those lights as well. You can blend these in as well. You don't have to just be stuck to, to what you're just drawing. And so you can blend them in. The thing to remember, though, is that you're only blending it into transparency. You're not blending it into the other colors necessarily. And so, as you're doing the blending, just realize that you're probably going to have to go back and do a little bit more blending by the time you're done, because the layers are all separate. And so you're just blending to transparent. Okay, now the other thing I want to do is get a real focused red, and we're going to go in and get his nose and his cheeks, possibly a little bit around the lips. Now he looks like an elf, but we'll blend that in. Blending can make a big difference, although sometimes you go a little too much, and so you can tone it back by just simply pulling in some cooler colors too. Okay, so we're getting there. I'm going to go back and we're going to add some additional colors in here. I'm going to get some blues coming in underneath. Oh, he's our multicolored vampire. Oh, dang it. I erased. Okay, and as you're going in and blending these in, just remember that none of this is necessarily final. You're just getting an overall color for it right now. And so, and then what I do and I'm not close to the very end, but I'm going to be, because I really need to speed this up. I've got just about 20 minutes left. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into more of my, I'm going to get a good color for a highlights. Hello, are you there? Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, sounds good. I was speeding things up. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm creating another layer. I'm clipping it to it. And this layer, I'm going to go in and I'm going to choose a white value. So I'm going to go into screen. And then from here, this is where I'm going to bring out my lights. But you got to be careful when you do this, because it can go bright real quick. So I'm going to lower down the opacity as I'm bringing out these lights, so that it's not overdoing it too much. I'm going to bring out some lights in his eyes too by throwing these in there. Okay, another thing I'm going to do is really pop that rim light. Although I'm going to change the rim light entirely at the end, it's not going to, I want to keep it about the same value as what my final is going to be. And so and this gives you a chance to also brighten up any areas where you went a little too dark. And I went a little too dark in some of these areas. Okay, so I'm getting there. Biggest thing about digital is to realize that you can always rework an area. And so don't think that just because you've painted it that it has to stay that way. I have a tendency to sometimes think that because I put the color down, it's got to stay that color. When one of the biggest advantages of digital is at the very end, you can go in and adjust the colors, and you can completely make things different than what you started with. And I'm having a tendency to make this guy look a little too real, I wanted to make him a little more cartoony, so I might have to work that out later. Okay. Get some highlights here on his lips. Okay. I'm getting a little flat right here because I went a little too bright. And so I want to pull it back a little bit. Okay. So I'm starting to get where I'm good with it, other than some blending still. Get that widow's peak really showing through in the brow. And then I'm going to go back in and do just a few more dark areas, but I'm going to make my darks just a little bit warm because it's going to, okay. It's just going a little too, well, it is going a little bit warm, but now what I have a tendency to do is switch over to a normal layer. And one of the things you can do if you want is you can merge everything together at this point. If you're not sure, though, what you can do is you can take all of the layers and you can duplicate them. And so that way, if you're not sure of the direction you're going, you can actually duplicate them to make adjustments to, and then if you don't like the way that you're going, you can turn them back on. I'm actually okay because I went ahead and just merged them all together, and now I can really start blending and getting the colors where I really would like to see them go. And I will zoom in just a little bit so I can start getting some additional colors built in. My opacity is way down. So I'm going to start defining some features here. So that I can get some of these features to stand out just a little bit more than they currently are. Let me get that nose to go a little bit more reddish. And then the cool thing too is you can save color palette. And so like if I go to these palettes here, you'll see that I have some different color palettes for skin tones. And so his skin tones are going to be more in this light skin area right here. And so because of that, I can start going through and selecting colors from this light skin palette. And And if anyone needs access to those, just tell me and I'll include them in my, I'll get them sent over to you. But in this light skin palette, you can go in and I mean, I'll work with the palette, but a lot of times I'll go in and just determine the value of what I'm looking for based off of that. And it can start really bringing out the skin tone that you're looking for. Now, admittedly, a vampire is going to have a really, really pale, and so that might be just a little too much pink, but we'll go with it for now. Maybe he just fed. But this allows you to quickly save stuff where you've had a good time getting to the colors that you're going for. You've had an easy time getting to it, and you can save those palettes out. Also, if you want to use a color palette from somebody else, or if you have a photo that you really like the color palette of, you can actually drag and drop the image straight into Procreate and use its, and it will go ahead and extract the color from there. Okay, now for the sake of time, I'm going to go in and I'm going to add my light. Because he's in a graveyard, I want it to be a little bit between blue and green. And so I'm going to go ahead and add, well, that's a little too light. So I'm going to bring it down. Let's saturate it a little bit more, but bring it down. And then we'll go ahead and start adding that rim light in. So I don't like to go too bright first. I will go in and add in a darker value and then lighten it up as I get going. Okay, so now that we're getting there, now I can go in and start lightening it up. Put a little bit more light in the nose, especially going across there. Nothing at the very end beats a good levels adjustment. And so I have a tendency to go a little dark on my paintings. And so at the very end, a lot of times I catch myself doing a levels adjustment just to take some of the dark out. But that's another real big advantage that you have when you go to when you're painting in when you're painting in digital. I'm going to get some yellows in here. So I'm going to go up to this campfire palette that I have and get some of these yellows in as well. We'll lighten up that light there. So like I said, I mean, if you have any questions, please feel free to send them over. I don't know if I can see them in Discord. Let me see. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything right off. But this is the first time I've used Discord, so I'm sorry, especially for people out there who know how to use the app real efficiently. But if you have questions, you can feel free to send them to me, and I will answer them as quickly as I can. Yeah, the other thing is zooming in and zooming out. You'll have a tendency to accidentally throw down some colors
Here's
and some lines. So you have to watch out for them. What were you going to say? Sorry.
Here's a question. Robin
Yeah.
Glassy, I hope I pronounced that correctly, asks if you're just starting out with digital art and learning Procreate, do you have recommendations for best links or tutorials for learning how to use Procreate?
Yes, I do actually. There are some very good tutorials that you can learn. There's a guy named Austin Batchelor, and Austin Batchelor has tutorials for both for all beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And he's a very, very good artist, and he's very good at teaching Procreate. Um, if you learn the principles that are in Procreate, though, you can pretty much take learning from anybody who teaches Photoshop as well. And I'm trying to think of the name of. There's another guy who I love his workflow, digital, and he. What is his name? I've got it on here. At the very end, I'll take a look and see if I can find his name for you, because his digital workflow to me is unparalleled. I haven't found anybody else who does things quite the way he does them, but he's excellent. He actually does anatomical images for for artists and for the medical field, and so he's fantastic at what he does. And so, anyways, so I'll find his name before we hit the end. So the last thing I'm going to work on is I'm going to try to get these eyes over. The whites of the eyes have a tendency to be more bluish in color, and so by default. Now, of course, if we were going to turn him into a vampire, make his entire eyes turn red, then this would be different than what I'm doing here. But I'm going to show you how to do a regular eye, and then we'll probably do the inside of his eyes is going red. And so first thing, remember that the eyelid has a shadow on it. And so you're never going to have it go completely to white at the top, because that's where a lot of people go wrong, is they have it go too bright along the top and they're not thinking of the shadow that's cast by the eyelid. And so let me go in here and get just a little bit of color in there and a little bit of color in there to show the skin over top of the eye. And then here, let's put a red, let's do a reddish color in here. Okay, so how I recommend doing eyes is go dark first, hit a mid-tone, and then go darker. And so I always switch over to my disc. And then start at the top by going dark. And then as you go down, you can leave some of the midtones that you put in. And so I'll fill the whole thing with midtones. And then I'm going to create that center, because the center is always going to be black. But then you take the darker colors and put them along top. And sometimes, if you do it right, you'll end up getting a real nice fade down to the lighter values. And then let me go back. Sorry. And then at the very end of the process, you go to your lightest values and you start putting those around opposite the direction that your light is coming from, like right around there. So if my light's coming from this direction there, then you put those lighter values around the opposite side. And that way you get it really looking like there's light shining into the eye. And then you can make it just a little bit lighter. And because eyes aren't perfectly round, and on the inside you have a bunch of little rods and cones, you're going to have these little pinpricks of light coming off, and so it's not going to be perfect every time, but you can end up with something like that, and it starts making the eyes look more realistic. Now, the other thing I have a tendency to do is I have a tendency to go over my dark colors, so I'll go back with my darker values and put them into the top of the eye to secure the shape of the eye, and to make sure that I didn't lose all my shadows when I added the color to them. And then at the very end process, you do the highlights. And the highlights, I don't ever recommend using pure white. And so just because, I mean, it was something that was taught to me when I was younger, and I just never go to pure white. And so I'm going in with kind of a yellowish color to get my highlights. And you have highlights normally because your eye is rounded. And so you'll normally have highlights in closer towards wherever your light source is coming from. Oh, I switched to my eraser on accident. Excuse me. And then what I do is I put highlights going along the bottom edge of the eye so that it makes the eyes look wet. Now, there might be something to be said about whether or not vampires even have wet eyes, but I'm going to make his look a little bit wet just so I can, excuse me, simulate. So there's eyes, but this is like I said, I'm a little bit drawn out on this. Excuse me. I'm just something stuck in my throat. I'm a little bit drawn out on this. The very last thing that you would do with eyes is the eyelashes. And so on guys, you really don't want to pronounce the eyelashes a lot, but guys do have eyelashes. And so you, excuse me, you'll want to go in and make sure that you put a little bit of those in there. And so I actually like using tools that give me that nice fine edge. And so one of the best calligraphy tools for putting in eyelashes are some of the best ones to use. And so I will go in and just briefly place in some lines there. But you normally do this at the very end. I'm still not really far enough along to feel comfortable putting in the eyelashes yet, because I know I'm going to be painting over them, because I don't have enough highlights in his face yet. But how you do the eyelashes is you pull them towards you and then you go up. And then when it starts getting towards where it's more facing you, you just go straight up. But as they get away from you, you pull them over a little bit and then go up. And so, but see, like right here, that area isn't really ready for highlights yet. I painted over most of my eyelashes that I did there. And the other thing is wrinkles. You want to pull out, if you're going to do wrinkles. Now, you can use texture brushes for this. This is something where you don't have to go in and actually do all the detail on them, but I'll do the detail just so I can show you how I would do it. I still like to paint some of the details and not rely on brushes for everything. And so what you do is you pull the lines down, and then what you do is you can sample that color as it's blending, so you can get a more accurate line. And then you can pull it down to make them look just a little more, because I want to give this guy some wrinkles. And so I'll pull some lines into his cheeks and down, and then start blending. Okay, well, we're at the end. I don't know if I can stay on longer. I will, but I'm pretty much at their schedule swim right now, and
It's
so
1 o'clock.
okay. So you can see everything's coming together. It actually looks a little more pink on the screen than it does on my iPad. My iPad, he's looking fairly pale right now. But other things that you should be aware of is teeth. Teeth, you want to stay as white as you can going across. And so you want to stay in grays and whites as much as you can. You don't want to go, well, and admittedly, this is a vampire, and so you don't necessarily have to make them look pretty. But if you're actually painting people's teeth, if you add too much color into their teeth, it makes them look funny. And so just be aware of that, because as you're going through your painting process, especially if you're doing a portrait of someone, you don't want to scare them off by adding a little too much color to their teeth. And so I have a tendency to stay in the grays and whites, so I can stay safe on painting teeth. And so, and I do a combination of blending and adding and blending and adding, and so that I don't go too bright or too light on it the first pass, because you don't want to be pulled into something too bright right off and then be afraid to take away from it. And so, okay. And now I'm lightening up that greenish highlight color that I put in. I'm going to go in and select kind of a midway value. There we go. To get that rim light exactly where I want it. And the good thing about the rim light is it's going to come in and hit off those little crags of the wrinkles that we added in there. And so it will help to bring those out and pull emphasis on the fact that he's wrinkly. And that greenish color will help emphasize the disease and everything. And then we'll get some of these highlights in the teeth. His teeth are jutting maybe a little far out. I guess it depends on the vampire that you're pulling your reference from. But I have his teeth just going a little too far out. And I'd probably make his lips just a little bit more reddish, because you want to emphasize the fact that he's a bloodthirsty vampire. And then getting the hair, I could do an entire class on hair, just to show people how to paint it correctly. The biggest thing about hair is you don't paint every single strand. You first go in, and when you paint hair, I normally will I won't completely maximize my brush size, but I'll increase the size of my brush so that I'm paying more attention to the shape of the hair and not the individual strands. And I'll block in the way the hair will look. And then I'll go back, and that's when I start adding in little details here and there. And so you'll notice I pretty much never go pure black, and I pretty much never go pure white. I always go to realms in between. And then what you do is you start blocking in the larger shape of the hair. Like if I want, I'm probably going to go more gray on this guy, but I wanted to get the black hair in first, and then I can add gray to it as I get going. And one of the negatives about adding in highlights early is that you paint over them. And so these rim lights that I added, those were a little bit early in the process. And so I'm painting over some of them, and I will continue to do so because I painted those in just a little bit early. And so don't get over anxious to get all the details in at the very beginning, because then you're making more work for yourself. And so I'm trying to complete this in a certain time period. And so because of that, I'm getting a little over anxious. And so now I'm going back in and adding in some lighter lights to push towards the light source. I'm cutting his hair back a little bit because I brought it down a little too far. Let me give him that widow's peak. Oh. Okay, well, I think that, let me blend this so that you're not left with a real bright yellow foreheady vampire. But I think that will get me largely where I'm going with this. It's definitely not done, but I would probably add a few more layers of highlights and work more to get that rim light blended in so it's not so stark. I probably went just a little too bright on it. And so, but it is kind of cartoony. And so because the game is more cartoony, I might be able to get away with it. A lot just depends on, and I don't like relying a lot on letting them decide. I like to make sure that I'm good with it. I'm far enough in my art career that I get to pick and choose the stuff that I want to do. I don't, but at the same time, I don't like, I like to make sure that I'm good with it, because I come to find that throughout my, the things that I'm good with are normally look good, and the things that I'm not good with normally don't look that great. And so I try to hold myself to that. And so anyways, when I'm making these decisions, I go in, and a lot of times it's based off of my intuition on whether or not something is working or not. And I'm also a designer too, and so I do both illustration and design, and so because of that, I'm not afraid to push the boundary at times. So okay, if there's any questions, like I said, my email's right there. You can feel free to contact me if anyone's interested. When I get this finished out, I can post it up somewhere so that people can take a look at it. And so once again, thanks for coming. I hope you learned something. That was my main focus, was to teach you things and then show you the things that I taught during the class.